Okay, real quickly, we only have 13 minutes. Here's the 6th lesson I found from chapter 1. What does the picture of Jesus reveal to us? I actually wrote to me, but for you, I changed it to us. Here are the truths revealed about Jesus. Look about what he looks like. Look at verse 14. It says, his head and hair were white like wool. What's that? That spoke of his eternity. When you look at Revelation, you see that this is quoting from the book of Daniel. And it says that the Ancient of Days had white hair. So this is speaking of his eternity. He's the Ancient of Days. He has hair white as snow. And he wants us to worship him. And then in verse 14, it continues. It says, his eyes were like a flame of fire. And that speaks of Jesus seeing everything. And he's inspecting our lives. He's got like laser eyes that can see all. And then his feet, it says in verse 15, were like fine brass, as if refined in the fire. And that speaks of Jesus as the ultimate judge. That's what the brass speaks of, judgment. And he can crush all of our foes. Then it says his voice was like, well, verse 15 says his voice was like the sound of many waters. And when Bonnie and I were on Patmos, I mean, you ought to hear those Aegean Sea storms when you're on a little rocky island. And you can imagine John hearing that huge sound of the waves crashing. And Jesus has that all-powerful voice of God. And then in his hand, he was holding the messengers. He says, and in fact, in verse 20, if you look at that, he explains it. The mystery of the 7 stars which you saw in my right hand and the 7 golden lampstands. The 7 stars are the messengers, the angelos of the 7 churches. And the 7 lampstands you saw are the 7 churches. So his hand, he holds the messengers of his church. He's holding them. It shows his truth. He's guarding his compassion. He's holding them. Out of his mouth, it says, is like a sword. Jesus is the Word, the Creator, the Redeemer. There's so many elements you can study about that. It says he spoke all things into existence. And then his face. It says in verse 16, his countenance or his face was like the sun shining in its strength. And just that overpowering brightness. Jesus is the all-powerful Lord of glory.